Hello and welcome to a new video. Today I'm going to be reading through and responding to Salon's article, The Right-Wing Politics of the Singularity. Believing that we should have a benevolent king, or AI god, rule over us harkens back to conservatism of yore. It's written by Jason Rode on May 26th, 2018. Let's begin. Silicon Valley is not a place known for its religiosity, yet a remarkable number of tech leaders and workers have an irrational belief in the singularity. For those of you not mainlining Reddit, here's the gist of the argument. The singularity is a term for a theoretical event predicted by several mildly famous technologists. In their telling, advancement of computer technology will ultimately lead to a self-improving artificial intelligence. The first self-aware AI will bootstrap itself at such an incredible rate that eventually it will outstrip our capabilities to help it, much less understand it. At that point, all bets are off. We will have passed into the area of the singularity. The resulting superintelligence will handle all our trifling annoyances, scarcity, morality, internet debates. The lucky among us may even become one with this infinite silicon brain. In essence, the singularity is a sort of church only an engineer could invent. In a previous article, I discussed the improbability of artificial intelligence. The singularity is for people who think AI is boring social realism. More accurately, people who hold that the singularity will eventually happen maintain that because artificial intelligence and computing power are getting better and better, computing power especially increasing at an exponential rate, that eventually the capability for a computer to think will reach the point where it's at the same level as a human being, and from there it'll continue to get better and better at a faster and faster rate. At the moment, artificial intelligence is actually incredibly well. Only for specific subjects, though. You can have the most capable chess-playing machine in the universe, but it can only play chess. ATMs are able to handle the withdrawals and deposits of millions of dollars worldwide, but that's all they can do. There's a lot of challenges in the way of making an artificial general intelligence that in turn these people think will eventually outrank human intelligence. But it's not quite the impossibility that I think this person is making it out to be. Whether or not the likes of, say, Kurzweil are right with their predictions outcome in 2045, there's nothing in the laws of physics demonstrating that it's absolutely impossible for artificial intelligence to be smarter than us. So let's continue on. The problem of proof. I am embarrassed to make such a minor, pedantic point in discussing a question as big as the singularity, but, well, it's just that, quite simply, there's no evidence to support it. You can just see how snarky this guy is trying to be. None. It is speculation informed by fiction. The singularity is fantasy covered by a patina of rational thought, but it is not rational. PowerPoint-informed imagination is not sufficient cause for physical existence. Belief in approaching AI, or even mildly human-like AI, requires considerable delusion. There's been so much work already on making artificial intelligence able to respond like humanity, is it really that delusional to think that eventually we'll figure it out and make an artificial intelligence that, say, would pass the Turing test, would be indistinguishable from another human being and you would completely think it was another human if you didn't know beforehand that you were talking to an AI? Our spreadsheets and databases possess no mindfulness. Well, it's a very good thing that artificial intelligence is not based on spreadsheets and databases. It's the attempt to make a machine think. And the Singularity has all the problems of AI, coupled with the maniac imagination of people who spend too much time looking at graphs. Technology does not create itself any more than boy bands do. Alas, this person is living in the early 20th century before, quite literally, we have machines designed to make other machines. Ask any poor sap who lost his job working in a car manufacturing plant to a single robot arm. I have no idea what this part means. The argument behind Singularity amounts to bare extrapolation. And that's it. Look at how fast computers are getting. Wow, what if we extend the line out to eternity? Singularity, yes. What if we extend the line further on? What if we take a look at how technology has been progressing in the past and try to think of where we'd be going in the future? I mean, that's basic methods of prediction. That's one of the most basic methods of rational thought. Trying to observe patterns and extrapolate what would emerge from them. It's deductive reasoning. Singularity thinking is like a man who finishes watching the Star Wars trilogy in 1998, right before The Phantom Menace comes out. Then he goes home and plots out the sequels, allowing for advances in movie making. His chart tells him that this next movie will be the greatest event in cinematic history. It's a bit odd that he'd use this specific example, considering that Return of the Jedi is the least liked of the original trilogy. In fact, considering how many movies, how many incredible franchises have had a good first movie, an incredible second movie, and an awful third movie, you can actually extrapolate that if there's a series you really like and it has a part 1 and a part 2, that part 3 might be kind of shitty. If there's a third Blade Runner, I'd be skeptical, because we've seen what happens with a third Spider-Man, a third Alien, a third Star Wars original trilogy. Here comes a great engine. Suppose you're at a tech conference. A steam engineer sits down across from you. He explains that the great steam engine is on the way. You scoff, but the engineer is emphatic. He has charts. Hasn't the steam engine tech evolved since the beginning of the 20th century? Modern materials are constantly improving. The Swedish company Engiri Project AB has a 5-cylinder engine with 30% efficiency. Arguably, modern steam engines now are the best they've ever been. Moreover, steam engines will one day improve themselves without human interference. After all, many steam engines are capable of self-regulating behavior using a governor. By the law of technological evolution, engines will upgrade themselves constantly. Faster engines will make faster engines. Eventually they'll hit light speed and travel in time. At some point in the future, a time-traveling steam engine will learn all secrets, discover the cure to death, and rule us justly. The steam Singularity will arrive. For this reason, you have obligations to time-traveling steam engine you may not be aware of. The engine will know who did and who did not support the research into steam. And even if you aren't afraid of the engine's vengeance, you have a moral obligation to contribute to organizations that are researching how to build the engine. Since the engine will solve death, if you do not support the engine, you're letting people die unnecessarily. You point out that steam engines have no agency. They do not steer themselves. At best, they follow the tracks we lay down. Well, for now, the engineer says. Alright, here's my counter hypothetical example to your own. This engineer who's crowing about, the great steam engine is already working on a steam engine that is able to direct itself and lay its own tracks. There's already research being done into ensuring that a steam engine is able to think and act out on its own volition without the use of a human being guiding it. In fact, we're working on something very similar to that right now. They're called self-driving cars. We're literally working on vehicles with artificial intelligence that are able to navigate themselves. Literally in the early 21st century, we're already sort of getting to the point at the very beginning, not this like ridiculous, fucking straw man equivalent there, but we're already getting to the point where yes, we are working on a smart engine. There happens to be a lot of other stuff attached to that engine. But yes, congratulations, you're catching up. The funny thing about the Singularity. Believing in the steam Singularity would require committing the error of projecting a graph to its illogical conclusion. If technology is getting better over time, and it's getting better faster and faster, then it's not exactly an illogical conclusion to say that it'll be even better in 10 years, and the amount of progress made in those 10 years will be more than the amount of progress in the previous 10 years. Again, deductive reasoning. Observing an upward trend and making some unscientific extrapolation, yet graphs of the steam engine efficiency are just that, graphs, simple models, not pictures of the world. Human beings are terrible about predicting the future, mostly because we forget the strangeness of history, the limitations of math, and the glacial slowness of societal change. One of my favorite quotes is by a guy called E.O. Wilson when he said, "The problem with mankind is that we have caveman brains, medieval institution, and godlike technology." It's a well-known and understood fact that society changes slower than technology progresses. I mean, good fucking God, Charlie Chaplin monologued about this at the end of The Great Dictator. It's not anything new. It's not new knowledge that the Singularitans haven't taken into account. And the fact of the matter is, again, it's not irrational to look at the history and progress that has been made and then think, alright, this trend will continue. Now, for all intents and purposes, it might not. Maybe we'll nuke ourselves into oblivion and throw ourselves back to the Stone Age. But unless there's a really good reason to assume that will happen, which I guess considering the North Korean summit actually went well, surprisingly, it's a bit less likely than might have been a month ago. It stands to reason to think that, yes, technology will improve. We're not going to make it shittier. If there's no rational evidence to believe in singularity, why do you keep calling it singularity? It's the singularity. What explains its apostles? As Daniel Kahneman used to ask when confronted with an irrational belief, what might be true of? The singularity is different from other pipe dreams, like the perpetual motion machine or Elon Musk. Singularity believers are legion and well-funded. How the fuck is Elon Musk not well-funded or even has a legion of adoring fans? It seems like you just went up to throw shade on him, probably because he wants to hold journalists to a higher standard than Salon is capable of. Yes, Elon Musk scraping by for his fucking projects. The most interesting feature of singularity is not the promise of AI, but the inability of self-labeled rational people to understand probability. The singularity is the image of rationality and not rationality itself. Reader, suppose your identity came from being a very smart person. Consider the kind of god you would dream up. If the god of soldiers is a man of war and the god of the poor is a generous master, then the god of techies would be a supremely intelligent machine. The Omnissiah! A machine that shares their preferences, a machine fashioned, in a sense, from their hand. The singularity is a perfect religion for the valley. Techies convince people of their genius by reinventing everything. And here they are, reinventing religion. Once again, this idea that eventually machines will become as intelligent as humanity, especially since a lot of work is being done in artificial intelligence, and we're starting to understand more and more of what limitations we're facing, what hurdles we need to cross, how human beings think, how to get machines to think. It's not far-fetched to think that eventually it'll be at our level and our capabilities all around, and then a hop and a skip smarter than us, and then further on and further on. But whatever, it's a religion, and not reinventing well. Singularity is a belief in a silicon deity, but it is not a mature faith. Most thoughtful monotheists struggle with the problems of an omnipotent God. No, they don't. They really fucking don't. If they struggled with it, they would have stopped using the most silly fucking excuses available for, why the problem of evil. They really don't fucking struggle. They devise theologies and arguments concerning the deity. Even if they're wrong, they show a seriousness that singularity fans lack. Well, first of all, theologians believe that God exists. He has always existed, he exists now, and he will always exist. Proponents of the idea that eventually artificial intelligence will reach a singularity believe just that. Eventually, it doesn't exist. So it's a very poor comparison, in my opinion, especially considering that the Singularians believe that their singularity machine is something that anyone would be able to interact with. It'd be a computer capable of thinking far better, well, at the level of and eventually far better than regular people and not some ethereal being that exists outside of time, space, and existence itself. Worse, the Singularity does honor to a monstrous notion, the benevolent despot. Ancient elites distrusted the rabble, so they invented the idea of the perfect king. During the Renaissance, political writing was obsessed with the notion of creating the good prince. With enough education, the right upbringing, the perfect words, an ideal ruler could be shaped. In modern terms, a benevolent despot would see all of the data, figure out the proper response, and the people would be just and happy. In 10,000 years of recorded history, no king has been worthy of absolute power. No machine ever will be. This is an interesting conundrum I think about often. Like, on one hand, I do think it would be a little bit better if the average people were able to govern themselves. But on the other hand, I'm very fucking aware of just how stupid the population can be. A sizable portion of the American population believes the Earth is only a few thousand years old. There's people who think that vaccines cause autism and other horrible diseases. There's people who think the Earth is flat. And what is wrong with wanting to shape a leader that can actually lead well? Need I remind you, Jason Rode, we are living in the era of Trump. We know what happens when we're stuck with a leader who doesn't have the right education, who is actually very likely fucking illiterate, who doesn't have the right upbringing, who doesn't have the perfect words. Yes, we should be expecting more of the people who lead us. We should be holding them to an incredibly high standard and demand that they are the best of whatever population they are a part of. And if we eventually come to the point where we're having artificial intelligences dictate policy, then yes, I do think we should build them to be the best leaders, rather than leaving them at the level of the likes of regular humanity, which is also imperfect. Even the divinely favored kings of the Bible run afoul of heaven, but the Singularity is divine right without any break, and should give us a pause. If you want a good shepherd, look inside yourself, read philosophy, or go to church. Nobody else is selling. Like, literally go to church where they tell you to unquestioningly follow the laws and morals of a supreme leader. Yes, spend the previous paragraph, shitting on the idea of creating an ideal leader to lead humanity, and then tell people to go to an institution that claims there's already an ideal leader to herd humanity. There's a lot of, I have no idea what fucking means with right-wing politics. At most, you got like old Renaissance concepts of a decent leader. But, it's no secret that people are working more and more on artificial intelligence because technology allows it to be worked more and more on. Computing power is far better than it's ever been, and therefore they are able to think far better than they ever used to. There's a lot of different sorts of artificial intelligences. I've mentioned ATMs, I've mentioned chess-playing robots, but you can also sort of look at the artificial intelligences that govern everything going on in video games. how the NPCs interact with you, how they react to what you're doing. It seems to me like there's just all these different parallel progressions going on in the realm of artificial intelligence, and eventually they'll get better and better and better, and it'll be a matter of trying to combine their skill. It'll be a matter of getting an artificial intelligence that is able to recognize objects at all sorts of different angles like a human being is, and be able to correctly identify what that object is, what the relevance is to it versus anything else in the room. It's a matter of figuring out how to get an artificial intelligence to problem solve. The robot's arm assembling cars I mentioned earlier, one problem with them is every single movement has to be programmed in, which means if the car they're working on is an inch to the right, they're not going to be able to assemble it. Getting a robot to understand, oh, hold on a second, this thing is a little bit to the right, I'm going to adjust any future parameters and actions I make in order to accommodate that change. Yes, that would be a very useful thing to have and would make artificial intelligence closer to what humanity is capable of. I do think that eventually we will reach a point where artificial intelligence is at the level of humanity. I don't know for certain. I have no strong beliefs on the whole 2045 prediction that Kurzweil uses, which oddly enough he didn't even appear once in this article. But I do think it is eventually possible. What is a brain if not a biological machine? There's no soul, there's no ethereal spirit, it's matter, it's consciousness, and is an emergent property of the brain, and we should be able to replicate that to an incredible degree in machines. And since we know that there's people who are smarter and dumber, we know that machines can also be smarter and dumber, and eventually machines will be smarter than us. I see no reason why humanity's intelligence should be the hard limit of intelligence in the universe. But I guess that's where Jason Rode and I disagree. He seems to be thinking that because it hasn't happened yet, because it's a theoretical thing that people are predicting based on past events, that it couldn't happen, that it won't happen. But every single human endeavor has been an extrapolation based on past events. It couldn't happen, it won't happen, that humanity will go to the moon and all the people crowing about the Wright brothers and the first flight. Well, how the hell are you going to make a better plane to the point where it can go to space? It can't happen, it won't happen, that we'll eventually be able to genetically engineer crops to have better yields, to be more prosperous in harsher environments, and the entire history of agriculture, you can point to that all you want, but how the hell are you going to get from that to tinkering around with DNA, especially considering how long it took previously in order to breed new crops? Now, it could be wrong. There could be some unknown variable in the matter that actually does prevent machines from being able to think on the level of humanity and beyond. But unless that barrier is found, there's no reason to stop. And if we do find it, we'd be better off having found it, because then we can either see if it really is a hard limit that can't be surpassed, and if it is, we can focus on something else. but crowing about how artificial intelligence is never going to reach humanity point and beyond, and then trying to attribute the more fantastical thinking about it, being able to solve all our problems, being able to make us all happy, which in of itself is a bit of a straw man, I think. People are just pointing out it would be a lot better fit to solve these problems. A machine that's able to immediately calculate all of these variables, all of the numbers, all of the data being inputted into it about things like distribution of food or distribution of resources, that it would be able to handle that better than a human being who needs to take a lot longer, and it is a lot more difficult for them to figure out. But whatever. It's Salon, what do you expect?